Hey everyone, welcome back to Famous People English Stories, where we explore powerful books and the stories of famous lives. Today, however, we are taking a fascinating turn. While our usual mandate is the deep dive into biographies and celebrated narratives, the sources we have stacked up today outline a different kind of famous life, the one you are currently building for yourself. We are diving deep into material that offers a definitive, almost radical roadmap for personal transformation. And the entire philosophy hinges on one simple yet profoundly ignored concept: consistency. If you're someone who starts strong, flames out quickly, or constantly feels like there's an invisible ceiling limiting your potential, well, this deep dive is crucial. We are looking at sources that argue consistency is the ultimate limit breaker, the great equalizer, the tool that routinely beats talent, strength, and yes, even raw intelligence.
That's absolutely right. And this is not just, motivational fluff. Our mission today is to really analyze the mechanics of the human psyche as described in this material. We want to understand exactly how those internal limits, the mental, emotional, and physical walls we construct, are formed, and more importantly, how they can be scientifically and systematically shattered. The key insight provided by this body of work is that this kind of profound transformation does not require one grand heroic gesture. In fact, it actively rejects that idea. Instead, it demands steady, often deeply uncomfortable daily effort. The core thesis is blunt and highly actionable. Your life only changes the day you decide to stay consistent. Consistency forces you to show up daily, even when inspiration is completely absent. And through that mechanical, repeated action, you dismantle every psychological and emotional barrier you once believed was permanent.
Okay, let's start with the fundamental challenge then: defining these internal limits. Because when you say invisible walls, it sounds a bit vague, perhaps. But the sources make it clear these are concrete psychological structures. They are invisible barriers, yes, but they were forged by our past failures, deeply ingrained fears, the opinions of people we respected, and most critically, our daily miter decisions.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the subtlety of their operation.
Mm.
They don't block you with a physical gate. They operate through, well, dialogue, an internal dialogue. They whisper. They tell you, you cannot go further, or this is too hard, or, you're just not capable, or maybe you shouldn't even try because you failed last time. And the moment you internally accept those whispers, that is the moment they assume control over your potential. They live in your self-talk and your immediate assumptions, shaping your entire behavioral reality without you even noticing half the time.
Right. So the first major invisible barrier the sources target is what they term the illusion of fixed reality. This is that deeply comfortable but paralyzing belief that change is impossible because of who you've always been. The internal narrative is, I've always been poor at public speaking, therefore I will always be poor at public speaking. It's like a cognitive lock.
And this lock is incredibly strong because it's reinforced by, well, decades of habit sometimes. The mechanism to counter this, according to the sources, is the consistent creation of undeniable evidence. You don't fight this belief with positive affirmations alone. That's like using a sponge on concrete. It just doesn't work long term. You fight it with action that contradicts the belief.
Okay, can you walk us through a specific example of that mechanism? How does one actually manufacture this evidence?
Certainly. Let's say your fixed reality is, I am bad at math, or maybe I am incapable of waking up early. Your mind has proof points for that, right? Memories of failures, struggles. To change it, you must create new, conflicting proof points, small ones, consistently. So if you commit to learning one new skill related to math for just 15 minutes every single day for 30 days, or you force yourself to wake up 10 minutes earlier every day for a month, your mind, which is fundamentally evidence-based, sees that successful completion. It cannot deny the data. You've successfully created evidence that change is possible even if the change is small initially. This repeated exposure to small wins starts to erode that fixed reality belief.
That makes a lot of sense. It turns the fight against yourself from this huge, overwhelming war into a series of small, winnable skirmishes. Okay, moving to the second wall, the fear of failure's high cost. Fear tells us, stay safe. If you try that, you might embarrass yourself in front of others. The sources are quite sharp here, noting that safety is expensive. It costs you massive growth.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where the consistency component becomes absolutely critical.
Yeah.
As we were talking about fear exposure training, most people think facing fear means tackling the biggest, scariest thing first, like jumping off the deep end. But the sources detail a systematic, almost therapeutic approach. The first time you take a bold, scary action, the physiological response is overwhelming. It feels paralyzing, right? Your heart pounds, you sweat. But the training component involves repeated, slightly scaled versions of that action.
So it's like microdosing the fear. Is that a fair way to put it?
Precisely. That's a great analogy. If speaking up in a large meeting is paralyzing for you, the first step of exposure training might be just to prepare one insightful question. Don't even have to ask it yet, just prepare it. The second day, you prepare two. Maybe the third week, you commit to saying just one sentence. Even if your voice shakes, what happens is, the second time you do it, the fear signal from the amygdala is smaller. By the 10th time, the fear has lost its chokehold over your physical response. Consistency in facing fear transforms you from someone whose brain defaults to avoiding threats into someone who actively seeks opportunity, because you have literally taught your nervous system that you can survive the perceived danger.
That leads directly into the third psychological barrier, the insidious negative self-talk. Ugh. These are the quiet daily voices. I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, or just, why bother? If you listen to and repeat these narratives long enough, you literally start fighting against your own goals. It's self-sabotage.
And to break this, you must engage in daily correction. And this requires energy. It's not passive, it's an active replacement program. It takes conscious effort. The moment the negative voice surfaces, for instance saying, I can't possibly handle this new project, you must consciously and consistently intervene. Don't just try to ignore it. You replace it with a counterstatement that is focused on effort and potential. Something like, I will try my best and I am learning daily. Or, this is hard, but I can figure it out step by step.
So the goal isn't necessarily immediate belief in the new statement, but creating a habitual response pattern that overrides the automatic self-criticism.
Yes, exactly. The consistency is the key here. You're building a new, self-supporting inner dialogue brick by brick. Daily repetition of these small internal corrections changes the default state of your mind. It stops you from constantly fighting yourself and starts generating internal strength. And that internal strength is the fuel needed to consistently seize opportunities that previously felt too big or too risky.
And finally, we have maybe the most seductive barrier of all, the comfort zone. Comfort feels safe, warm, familiar, low effort. But the sources argue it keeps you small and guarantees stagnation.
It really does. The mechanism to move past this is called normalization through effort. Growth requires consistent exposure to discomfort. There's just no way around it. The trick is to push your boundaries just a little bit every day. What once felt impossible, say, running a marathon becomes manageable because the small, daily uncomfortable runs normalize the physical and mental strain over time. Our sources use this powerful image of the edge of capacity. You find where you are comfortable, maybe it's making 5 sales calls a day, and then you take a single step beyond that edge, maybe try for 6 every single day. This is how leaders build courage to handle massive crises by consistently taking small, uncomfortable leadership decisions when things are calm. It's the daily decision to stay slightly uncomfortable that chips away at the walls that hold us back.
So if I'm understanding the synthesis of this section, breaking a barrier once, that heroic one-off effort, is never really enough, is it? The mind, because it seeks efficiency, will immediately slip back into the old pattern unless we reinforce the new pattern daily. It's a daily commitment to active growth that keeps those walls from rebuilding themselves.
That's the core message. It's relentless, daily reinforcement. By building on that concept of daily reinforcement, let's look at 2 major culprits that feed on inconsistency and keep those walls intact: hidden fear and soft excuses. Our sources dedicate significant discussion to how fear disguises itself as logic. This is crucial. Fear rarely announces itself as raw panic. It hides in hesitation, endless analysis, procrastination, and silence. It's that little voice that convinces you very rationally, oh, it's not the right time to launch that project, or I'll start when I have more experience, more qualifications, more money.
That is the ultimate trap, isn't it? Because it sounds so reasonable on the surface. We all value prudence and careful planning. But if you never actually start, those logical sounding excuses simply steal the dream before it even has a chance.
They seal more dreams than catastrophic failure ever could. That's a key point. Because fear ensures you postpone your goals indefinitely, always waiting for the perfect time, which, as anyone who has started anything knows, is completely mythical. It doesn't exist. The hidden cost is lost momentum and, frankly, the atrophy of ambition over time.
So, what's the underlying biological root of this? Why does my brain offer me these seemingly rational reasons to procrastinate and stay safe? It feels like it's trying to help, but it's actually holding me back.
Well, it boils down to biological resistance. Your brain's default setting is preservation, safety first. It interprets new challenges, a significant career change, pitching an unfamiliar idea, even entering a high-risk relationship as potential risks to your survival or your social standing. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational planning, gets sort of hijacked by the amygdala, the fear center, which basically screams, danger, danger, retreat. Waiting for that fear to magically disappear is a fatal error. It only reduces through repeated, consistent exposure and action that proves to your system that the danger is not lethal, or even real most of the time.
Okay, so how do we begin the fight against this hidden, biologically wired enemy? Where do we start?
The first step is what they call the naming strategy. You have to force yourself to pause in that moment of hesitation and ask the most critical question. What am I actually afraid of here? Really dig down. Is it financial rejection? Is it social embarrassment? Is it looking foolish? The sources suggest often the fear is secondary. We aren't afraid of the task itself, but of the judgment that might follow a perceived failure. Naming this specific fear extracts it from the realm of vague, overwhelming anxiety and puts it into the category of a solvable problem. Takes away its invisible power.
Once we name it, we need to act. Which brings us right back to consistency, doesn't it?
Exactly. This requires bold action consistency. And we must reiterate, bold doesn't mean extreme or reckless. It means challenging to your unique personal comfort zone. So if you hate conflict, your bold action might be stating one firm boundary once a week. If you fear networking, it might be sending one sincere, non-spammy email introduction every morning. The goal is to deliberately attempt things where minor mistakes or rejections are likely, thereby continually proving to your system that you can survive failure and judgment. You have to starve fear with action because it thrives entirely on avoidance.
Okay, I think we have to talk about the softer, maybe more insidious enemy now. Excuses, the soft lies. These are the quiet justifications we whisper to ourselves that sound so reasonable. I'm just too tired tonight. I don't really feel like it. I'm not quite ready yet.
They are soft because they feel justified in the moment. Who can argue with being tired? But they are lies because they are shields. They're shields used to avoid responsibility, effort, and discomfort. The sources highlight the profound danger of excuse making. Every single time you give in to an excuse, you reinforce a negative feedback loop. You lower your personal standards just a tiny bit. And dreams, the research concludes, die slowly from 1,000 daily excuses, not one massive spectacular failure. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
One of the most frequently used excuses is time. I just don't have the time. People genuinely believe they lack the hours necessary to pursue their goals.
Right, and that's where the sources challenge the listener brilliantly. The problem is almost always priority, not time. That's a hard truth for many. Everyone, from the busiest CEO to the new parent juggling everything, operates within the same 168 hours a week. There's no secret time bank. The goal is to challenge the excuse daily by forcing yourself to prove, I make time, rather than passively accepting, I don't have time. This involves actively reclaiming wasted pockets of time, the 15-minute scrolling before a meeting, the 30-minute zoning out after dinner, and dedicating them consistently to meaningful action.
But let's get skeptical here for a second, because this is where many people get tripped up and quit. This idea that action must come first, even when you feel completely devoid of energy or desire. We're all sort of waiting for the motivation trap to save us. We wait for inspiration to strike, assuming that desire will magically lead to effort.
It's the single most destructive trap in personal development, I think, because motivation is purely an emotional state. It's unpredictable, it's fleeting. It comes and goes. If you wait for it, you will never build consistency. The sources argue and demonstrate quite convincingly the reverse. Action must come first. Action generates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. It's counterintuitive, but true. By acting even when you absolutely do not feel like it, that sheer act of discipline, you develop self-respect and a sense of capability that pushes you further than any fleeting feeling of inspiration ever could.
So the feeling of pride and capability that comes after the task is complete, that's the true, reliable source of motivation, not the feeling before.
Precisely. You are essentially training yourself to trust your discipline over your mood swings, and that's incredibly powerful.
Okay, moving from the daily choices, the excuses and fears to the root causes. Section 3 explores how our deep-seated beliefs act as invisible chains. These limiting beliefs, thoughts like, I don't deserve this success, or I am defined by my past mistakes, or maybe people like me don't get opportunities like that. They're just thoughts repeated so often they become filters. Filters that shape our interpretation of reality, even when the objective reality flatly contradicts them.
That's right. And these beliefs are often not facts at all. They are emotional artifacts, frequently formed during highly impressionable periods in our lives, maybe planted by the critical voice of a teacher, a doubting parental figure, or a significant failure we never properly processed and learned from. They operate like malware running silently in the background of our mind, governing our interpretation of every new opportunity and every potential boundary. Destroying them isn't a single therapeutic breakthrough moment. It's a meticulous, daily, active process of rebuilding the entire mindset. It takes work.
And the sources provide a very clear three-step daily process for tackling these invisible chains. Step 1 is recognition. Makes sense.
Yes, you have to become hyper aware of your self talk, like a detective investigating your own mind. You need to catch the exact statement you repeat when you hesitate, when you avoid action, or when you sabotage your own success. What are the words you use? Recognition is the absolute prerequisite for freedom. You must stop confusing the belief, which is just a recurring thought, with the truth, which is objective reality. They are not the same thing.
Okay, so after recognition, step 2 moves us to the origin of the thought, questioning and origin.
This is where we apply curiosity to our internal landscape. You have to ask yourself, where did this specific belief actually come from? Who told me this? Or where did I pick it up?
Mm.
And more importantly, why did I accept it as permanent truth back then? You will often find the source isn't a fact or a universal law at all, but a memory, a projection from someone else, or a fear originating from another person's limitations. Just questioning the belief's origin weakens its power significantly. It reminds you that just because you accepted an idea at age 12 doesn't mean you must carry its burden at age 40. You can update your beliefs.
And the crucial third step is replacement and evidence. Because if we just tear down an old belief, the mind hates a vacuum, right? The old, comfortable pattern will rush back in to fill the space.
Absolutely. You must intentionally install a replacement belief that is empowering and growth-oriented.
Mm.
Use it carefully. For example, replace the thought, I always fail when I start something new, with the new belief. I am a learner who is improving daily, and failure is just necessary data. But here's the crucial part, tied back to consistency. These new beliefs cannot be mere mental affirmations chanted in the mirror. That's not enough. They must be reinforced with daily action that actively contradicts the old belief. The action provides the proof.
Can you elaborate on that required action component? How does action prove the new belief?
Sure. Let's say you believe you are fundamentally financially irresponsible. The old belief. The contradictory action is forcing yourself to check your bank account every single day. Maybe track every dollar spent using an app for a month, create a simple budget, and stick to it for a week. That consistent action becomes the daily evidence that proves your old belief false. You are actively collecting irrefutable wins against the invisible chain. The more evidence you collect through consistent action, the stronger the new mindset grows until it literally overrides the old mental software entirely.
That makes sense. And what about the impact of external forces? Our sources highlight the role of environment quite strongly.
Yes, the environment is a constant feedback loop, influencing those beliefs whether we like it or not. If you surround yourself with constant negativity, people who project their own doubts onto you, or criticism that reinforces your perceived weaknesses, your mind absorbs those limiting messages like a sponge. It makes it nearly impossible to rebuild a stronger mindset if your environment is constantly tearing it down. Every conversation you participate in or even overhear either reinforces those limits or helps expand them. Choosing your environment carefully, or creating psychological distance from toxic influences if you can't physically leave, is not just advisable, it is absolutely essential. Because breaking these deep-seated beliefs requires every ounce of internal energy you have, and you simply cannot afford that energy being drained by external negativity.
This sounds well exhausting. It implies these beliefs are incredibly sticky and resistant.
They are. They are deeply ingrained because they are old habits of thought, often formed over years or decades. They resist change fiercely. This demands patience and persistence, real patience. You might successfully challenge and replace a belief one day, feeling great, only to have the old critical voice reassert itself the next morning when you're tired or stressed. Consistency is the only force capable of wearing them down over time, like a steady stream of water eroding a large stone. It's not about one big blast, it's about the constant dripping. The key is to reinforce the new beliefs daily through thought and action, because the old ones, if neglected, never truly disappear entirely. They just lie dormant, waiting for a moment of weakness to reassert control.
But the reward, the eventual payoff for this consistent, sometimes draining mental war, what does that look like?
The sources suggest the reward is fundamental, truly life-changing. The destruction of limiting beliefs results in you waking up with proactive energy instead of that familiar, paralyzing doubt. You move from a life constantly constrained by fixed, often inherited ideas to a life directed by deliberate choice, self-trust, and eventually boundless confidence in your ability to learn and adapt.
Okay, we absolutely must shift now to the physical and emotional realms because the sources are adamant about this.
Mhm.
The mind cannot operate at peak capacity in a compromised vehicle. It just can't. Pushing physical limits daily is about recognizing that the body is the foundational energy system and the vehicle of your entire life. Neglecting it inevitably limits your overall energy, your focus, and your drive for everything else.
Right. And the initial hurdle here for many people is the energy paradox. So many people complain about chronic fatigue, assuming energy is this finite resource you must hoard and conserve. The sources state the complete contrary. Energy is generated, not conserved. The more you consistently push your limits, safely and smartly, of course, the more energy systems you actually build within your body. Movement creates circulation. Better circulation optimizes nutrient and oxygen delivery to the brain, which in turn creates mental vitality, clarity, and focus. It's a positive feedback loop.
What is the underlying physiological mechanism that the sources reference when they talk about generating energy? Is it just feeling good?
No, it's more concrete than that. It often involves discussion of things like mitochondrial density and hormonal balance. When you push your physical edge consistently, whether that's walking faster uphill, lifting slightly heavier weights, or holding a yoga pose a bit longer, your cells adapt. They actually create more mitochondria, which are the tiny powerhouses within each cell. This physical consistency literally increases your internal capacity for energy generation at a cellular level. It
Yeah.
makes tasks that previously felt draining start to feel manageable, even energizing.
So the mechanism of pushing is really about finding that edge of your current capacity and deliberately stepping just beyond it, but doing it in small, consistent ways.
Exactly. You are actively avoiding settling for the physical comfort that inevitably leads to atrophy and decline. If your comfortable run is 20 minutes, you push it to 22. If you can do 10 push-ups, you try for 11 next time. This is the daily defiance of the comfort zone applied directly to the body. You're sending a constant signal to your body that its limits are not fixed, they're artificial and flexible.
The sources then connect this physical effort directly to mental fortitude through something they call mental toughness transfer. How does
Yeah.
that work?
This is a really critical link. Every time you consciously push through physical discomfort, that burning sensation during the last set of squats, the breathlessness of a final sprint up the stairs, you are training your brain's ability to handle stress and persist under strain. That learned resilience against physical pain or discomfort transfers directly to difficult mental projects, long and tedious tasks, prolonged negotiations, or emotionally taxing conversations. If your mind knows it can command the body to keep moving when it desperately wants to stop, it starts to realize it can command itself to keep working when a project feels overwhelmingly hard or boring.
But okay, if we are pushing hard consistently, there must be a counterbalance, right? You can't just push indefinitely without consequence.
Absolutely not. That's crucial. The sources stress the key input requirement. Training hard without proper fuel, meaning nutritious food that sustains energy and aids recovery, and without proper rest, meaning high-quality sleep for tissue repair and cognitive restoration, leads straight to burnout, injury, and emotional volatility. That's not growth, that's destruction. Consistency requires just as much respect for the inputs, the recovery, as it does for the outputs, the effort.
Okay, now let's address the emotional side of things. Strengthening emotional control daily. The sources frame emotions not as bad things, but as signals. Important signals, but not dictators. Emotional chaos, letting feelings run wild, is a huge goal sabotager. It makes people quit, lash out, and destroy the very relationships necessary for long-term success.
Right. And the starting point for gaining mastery, for getting a handle on this, is the pause and awareness. It sounds simple, but it's profound. We often move immediately, unthinkingly, from feeling something intense, anger, frustration, anxiety, stress, to reaction, lashing out verbally, quitting the task, withdrawing completely. The practice of consistency here is creating a tiny space between the stimulus and the response. When an intense emotion surfaces, practice the pause. Literally stop what you're doing physically, take 3 deep, intentional breaths, and ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now and why?
That moment of interruption, that's where choice lives, isn't it?
It is. That's the gap. It prevents the automatic, often destructive, chaotic response and brings the executive function of your mind, the rational part, back into control. This pause allows for regulation versus suppression. And that's a key distinction. Regulation means channeling the emotion healthily, maybe releasing built-up frustration through a hard physical workout, or expressing sadness constructively to a trusted friend, or journaling about anxiety. Suppression, on the other hand, is just pretending the emotion doesn't exist, stuffing it down. Suppression only makes the emotion stronger and guarantees it will leak out sideways or lead to eventual blowups. Daily regulation prevents inner chaos from derailing your long-term goals.
And finally, within emotional mastery, there's building the capacity to bounce back, resilience and recovery.
Yeah, resilience isn't something you're born with or without. It's built daily, like a muscle. It comes from consistently facing small setbacks and not letting them derail you completely. It comes from deliberately remembering past struggles you successfully navigated, reminding yourself, I've gotten through hard times before. And crucially, it comes from focusing your efforts solely on what you can control in the present moment, not wasting energy on what's already happened or what might happen. The goal is emotional stability, the ability to bend under pressure without catastrophic breaking. And to reinforce all of this, the sources suggest a regular inner harmony check. This means consistently, maybe even daily, Checking if your actions align with your deepest core values, things like honesty, growth, family, community, purpose. Conflict between your daily actions and your stated values, say constantly sacrificing family time despite saying family is your highest value, is a guaranteed generator of inner chaos, guilt, and eventual emotional breakdown. Alignment brings peace. Okay, so if consistency is the engine driving us forward, then focus is the weapon that makes that engine effective. Chapter 7 details how we must train unstoppable focus daily. Achievement is fundamentally separated from wasted potential by the simple ability to hold your attention long enough to follow through on important tasks. That's the bottom line. And the modern world, let's be honest, seems deliberately designed for distraction. It makes this consistency of focus incredibly difficult.
It really does. It feels like a constant battle against notifications, infinite scrolls, news alerts, emails, everything demanding a piece of our attention right now. So, how do we realistically win that battle on a daily basis?
Well, it requires strict, proactive discipline. There's no passive solution. First, clarity is absolutely essential. You must identify the single most important task, the one thing that provides the most leverage each day. Vague goals inevitably lead to scattered, low-impact attention. Know your target.
Mhm.
Second, we have to actively curate and protect our environment. Willpower, we know now, is a finite resource. It depletes. You must physically cut off external temptation as much as possible, turn off non-essential notifications, use website blockers or focused work apps if you need to, dedicate a specific physical space just for deep work. If your environment constantly tests your willpower, you will eventually lose that battle. Make it easy on yourself.
And what about the practice of deep work itself? Because many of us, myself included sometimes, are chronic multitaskers. We feel productive switching between 10 things.
Yeah, that feeling of productivity from multitasking is largely an illusion. The sources warn quite strongly that it's a trap that fragments your energy and guarantees mediocrity across the board. You do 10 things poorly instead of one thing well. You must practice deep work. That means single tasking on your most important thing in short, dedicated time blocks. Maybe start with just 25 minutes, like the Pomodoro technique. Then gradually extend that duration as your focus muscle gets stronger. And when the inevitable internal distractions pop up, worry about the future, boredom with the task, suddenly remembering you need to buy milk, the consistent practice is mindfulness. Gently, non-judgmentally, bringing your attention back to the work over and over again. Focus is the muscle. It grows only with this repetitive, often difficult exercise of bringing it back. And building this capacity requires mastering the value of delayed gratification. Focus means actively resisting the immediate, easy, pleasure-checking social media for a quick dopamine hit, switching to an easier, less important task for the sake of the significant long-term delayed achievement. That daily resistance builds the mental infrastructure necessary to tackle genuinely significant, complex goals that require sustained effort.
Okay, now, let's talk about failure and setbacks. Because even the most focused, consistent person encounters resistance and things go wrong. It's inevitable. The sources make a crucial distinction here. Overcoming setbacks daily means viewing them not as signs of fundamental failure or inadequacy, but as proof. Proof that you are stretching your limits, proof that you are actually growing.
Absolutely. The difference between those who quit after a setback and those who compound their consistency over time lies almost entirely in the perspective shift, is how you frame it. Instead of asking, why me, or getting lost in frustration and blame, you must train yourself to immediately ask, what specifically can I learn here? What weakness in my approach, my skills, or my plan did this setback expose? This transforms the setback from an enemy that humiliates you into invaluable instruction that guides you. It shows you exactly what pattern or knowledge gap needs to be addressed. It's feedback.
And the essential follow up to that learning is control your response, taking ownership.
Yes. Even if the setback was largely caused by external factors, a bad client, a sudden market shift, unexpected circumstances, Taking responsibility for your response is where your power lies. You must choose how to react. Shift your entire focus away from what you cannot change, the past event, the other person's actions, to what you can do right now, the next step, the adjustment, the communication. This conscious decision to take immediate responsible action is what turns a potentially crushing obstacle into just a temporary stepping stone.
And setbacks are actually excellent teachers, the sources suggest, because they demand adaptation and humility.
Exactly. Setbacks force you to recognize that your original plan, however brilliant you thought it was, often won't work perfectly in the real world. Things change. Humility, accepting that you don't know everything, being willing to learn from the situation, accepting input, allows you to use the setback as an actual guide, rather than fighting reality out of pride or ego. The most successful people, consistently, are those who adapt quickly and constantly iterate on their approach based on the feedback reality gives them, including setbacks.
Okay, finally in this section, we tackle stretching personal standards daily. This is interesting. The sources argue that the quality of your life is determined not primarily by your ambitious goals, but by the minimum standards you consistently enforce for yourself. Most people, they argue, settle for comfort, doing just enough to get by, meeting the minimum expectation.
Right. And true growth, sustainable growth, requires the consistent, deliberate elevation of those personal standards, not someone else's standards, yours. The true competition is internal. It's not about comparing yourself to others online or next door. Your standards are personal promises you make to yourself. You are competing solely with the person you were yesterday. Am I slightly better today?
Hmm.
This mindset eliminates the paralysis and unhappiness of endless social comparison and keeps you laser focused on genuine, incremental personal progress.
How do we balance those high standards with the very real danger of burnout from perfectionism? That seems like a fine line.
It is a fine line, and it's crucial. The distinction is high standards versus perfection. High standards mean a commitment to continuous progress. That idea of maybe 1% improvement daily, holding yourself accountable to growing steadily, learning from mistakes, showing up fully. Perfectionism, conversely, is the demand for flawlessness right now, which is paralyzing, unrealistic, and ultimately unsustainable. It leads to procrastination because the bar feels impossibly high. Consistency is the process of sustainable elevation, aiming for better, not instantaneous perfect. And this elevation, this journey towards higher standards, is powered by discipline as the bridge. Discipline, simply following through on your commitments and standards even when it's boring, unnoticed, inconvenient, or difficult, is the only reliable bridge that connects your high standards to actual tangible results. And when you commit to this daily discipline, something profound happens internally. Your identity shifts. You stop viewing yourself as someone who's inconsistent, maybe weak-willed, or unreliable. You start seeing yourself, based on the evidence of your actions, as strong, disciplined, and someone who always follows through, even when it's hard. That new identity then becomes a powerful engine fueling all future growth and consistency. You act in accordance with who you believe you are.
So we've broken down the psychological walls, we've confronted the deep-seated fears and excuses, we've built the physical and mental tools through consistent effort. We arrive now at the powerful, overarching conclusion of these sources. Limits are just lines drawn in the mind. They feel real, solid even, but they are not external, universal walls. They are ideas reinforced by decades of unchallenged doubt, fear, and maybe negative feedback from others. And the empowering part is every single day provides a new opportunity to redraw those lines to prove those old ideas wrong.
Absolutely. And that requires a mindset of daily defiance. Not angry defiance necessarily, but consistent defiance. This doesn't involve one massive, reckless, irresponsible leap into the unknown. It usually means consistently pushing just a little further than you did yesterday or than you thought you could. If you believe your creative limit is 2 hours of focused work before you burn out, you aim for 2 hours and 15 minutes today. If your limit is running 2 miles, you try for 2 and a tenth. These are small, non-catastrophic acts of defiance against your perceived limitations, but they build the crucial evidence your mind needs to start believing that the invisible ceiling it created is, in fact, false. It's malleable.
And we absolutely must challenge the danger of assumptions. The limits we accept often sound so perfectly reasonable, don't they? Like, you're too old now to start that, or you don't have the right resources or connections, or that kind of success is only for lucky people, not for me.
Those are almost always assumptions, not proven facts. They only stay alive and powerful if you never actually test them through action. The moment you act in consistent spite of them, by enrolling in the course anyway, by reaching out to that contact, even if you feel unqualified, by starting the side hustle with minimal resources, you often discover they were just fabrications,
Mm.
mental constructs that disappear the moment they are exposed to real-world action and effort.
And this brings us right back to that fundamental dynamic between courage and comfort. They seem like opposites in this context.
They really are. Comfort is the perfect breeding ground for limits to grow strong and feel permanent. It's safe, known, requires little effort. Growth, by its very nature, is inherently uncomfortable. It asks you to stretch beyond what's familiar, to risk failure or judgment, to feel exposed and uncertain. But the key insight is the discomfort of growth is temporary. It might last a few minutes during that tough workout or a few hours wrestling with a difficult problem. The pride, the confidence, the expanded capability that comes from proving yourself stronger than your perceived limits, however, lasts forever. It becomes part of your new identity.
And for many people, the fear of failure is the main thing keeping them stuck in comfort. But the sources completely reframe this fear, don't they?
They do, quite radically. They argue that failure is not proof of weakness. It is evidence of courage. Read that again. Evidence of courage. If you have not failed at anything recently, it is powerful proof that you're staying safely within boundaries you already know you can handle. You're not stretching. Failure isn't a final judgment on your worth or capability. It is necessary data. It simply shows you where the edge of your current capacity was. It is concrete evidence that you are actively and consistently stretching beyond the limits you once accepted as fixed. It means you're trying.
So ultimately, the entire philosophy we've explored today, this whole roadmap, hinges on the final choice you make today and tomorrow and every day after that.
Correct. Every morning when you wake up, every time you start a new project, every challenging conversation you face presents you with that fundamental decision. Will you stay where you are? Will you listen to the comfortable, familiar fear? Will you accept the reasonable sounding excuse? Or will you choose to push just a little further? Will you move through the resistance, even if it's uncomfortable? Will you demand action from yourself regardless of how you feel? A consistent choice made daily to prove your own limits wrong in your body, in your emotions, in your work, in your beliefs, builds an unstoppable momentum. The kind of momentum that guarantees a life where you are not trapped by invisible ceilings, but actively creating your own potential. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. This has been a really powerful, highly detailed analysis of personal transformation. And I appreciate how it moves entirely away from just fleeting motivational fluff and focuses squarely on the almost mechanical application of daily consistency. We covered three critical intertwined areas, didn't we? Consistency in action, which is about defeating fear and challenging those soft excuses. Consistency in mindset, destroying old limiting beliefs and deliberately raising your personal standards. And consistency in effort, actually pushing your physical and emotional limits daily.
Exactly. And the relevance to you, the listener, the learner, is the mechanism itself. You now have the roadmap, the blueprint really, to move from being trapped by those internal limits, those persistent I can't or I'm not ready yet voices, to living a life fundamentally directed by deliberate choice and measurable consistent action. This deep dive has hopefully provided a kind of shortcut to understanding the operational blueprint for continuous personal expansion. It's actionable. And perhaps the final thought to leave you with is this. The greatest challenge you will ever face is probably not external competition or obstacles out there in the world. It's refusing to accept the invisible ceilings you yourself have created and reinforced through years of self-doubt, unchallenged assumptions, and soft excuses. A life without ceilings, a life of continuous expansion and progress, is genuinely available to anyone willing to consistently confront their internal limits day after day and refuse to settle for comfort. The question really is, having seen this detailed roadmap today, will you accept those limits again tomorrow morning? Or will you choose to prove them wrong with consistent daily defiance? That choice, made repeatedly, is what ultimately decides the size and quality of your life.